Thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us what is your testimony.
Thank you. It was a no-brainer, by the way. Like, I was watching hours of your channel, and I was like, I need to put myself out there somehow. Yeah, so I'm Stephanie. I was originally born and raised in New York City, so first generation immigrant household. My parents, they are originally from Bangladesh, which is in South Asia, and I believe my father, he left his country first, and he had to leave for work because he was the middle child, and his father died even before he got married, so he had to step up really early and work. My mother, her parents basically sent her to America when she was 18. She was the second to last in her family, so, just in accordance with, Islamic culture, she was kind of married off, somebody else's burden now. So here they are, 13-year age difference, huge generational gap. They're trying to, navigate marriage in a new city, and they are very in a battle, It's like they come from the East, they wanna lead with the Eastern life, but they live in the West. So that's already a red flag there, like, I couldn't even stand a chance. So it was really hard for me growing up, I think, going to a school in New York, everybody, there's Catholics, there's Jews, there's Hindus, there's Buddhists. Here I am, wearing the hijab in 3rd grade. I'm, like, 7, 8 years old. Instantly I stand out. Everyone's looking at me, "What's wrong with you? Why are you covering your hair?" It never made sense to me, but I wanted to hold on to it so hard. I wanted it to make sense to me because this is the title that's given to you. You're Muslim, and I was taught that we are the penultimate, we're the number one religion. Everybody else around me is second class. And that's kind of the culture in my household. I was allowed to have non-Muslim friends, but don't get close to them the way you get close to a Muslim. Don't marry them, don't become best friends with them, don't do business with them. You can bring them to our house. They eat our food. They have to, adopt our customs in the household. I can't go to their house and do the same thing. And so I was always a rebellious kid, I would always sneak off and try to learn things about my friends. A lot of them were Catholic, and I would go to church with them secretly. And I should have known from there that, that was the seed that was planted.
That's wonderful. So, rebellion is a necessity to break out of the religion of Islam for sure. Curiosity is another one. When you ask too many questions, you're quickly met with vengeance. So, this is your growing up and then practicing Muslim family, how involved they were in the mosque, in the Eid, in the traditions, in the Sunnah. How much of that you learned when you were growing up, Stephanie?
Oh my God, it was, just to the max, the ultimate like form of devotion. It was, Islam is the forefront. So being South Asian, being Bengali, all of that culture, it comes last. And it was rough for me because, I love culture. I love, just being rooted in where you're from. And it was a battle for me because I always knew growing up that Islam is completely foreign to our country. It was brought over, through imperialism and, conversion. What I was taught is that Islam is a miracle and that we should be grateful that we're Muslim. And that never made sense to me because they're always kind of picking and choosing, So we had to wear the hijab. You can't mix with the other gender. But then we're also doing like Bengali weddings and listening to music. And it's confusing because it's just a huge like hypocrisy to me. And I would always question it, and I was being stifled. I remember being 6 years old, and I told my mom, I was like, hey, my Catholic friends, they love Jesus. They wear, the necklaces. I told my mom, I love Jesus, because I knew that he was a prophet in Islam, and he's mentioned in the Quran, more than Muhammad. And my mom says, don't ever say that again. Muhammad is the most important. We don't even say Jesus, it's Isa. We don't care about him. He didn't get resurrected. He wasn't on the cross. It was somebody else, which never made sense to me, to this day. And every walking step, it's like you wake up first thing in the morning, you do your, the uzu, the ablution, you pray, go to school, Pray, 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 pray. Go to the bathroom, pray. You forget to say that, there's a prayer for that. You come out of the bathroom, there's a prayer for that. You know, you wash your hands, there's a prayer for that. You eat, there's a prayer for that. And there's so many rules. And at the time, it made sense. At the time, I was really brainwashed. And, you know, I wore the hijab, the head covering. And the way I was presented is I'm doing something for the Lord and I'm doing something that's, you know, gonna win me brownie points essentially. And that was always just really rough because I'm seeing everyone around me who isn't Muslim, they're happy, they're so like full of joy. And for me it was rough because, you know, my dad was the type of person who, you know, he was a board member at the mosque and 5 times a day praying, um, all of the, you know, Eid, spending so much money on like sacrificing the cows and the goats. Just, I feel like doing all these things to keep up with the Jones, but the atmosphere at home didn't match that. So he was really angry. He was a really angry man. He would hit my mom physically in front of us. He would threaten to like do all sorts of, you know, abusive things to her. He even told me once that we're lucky we live in the West because if he still lived in the East, Islamically he would be allowed to do more violent things to my mom. And that was just the norm, you know. It's hush hush. You keep it behind closed doors. And, you know, the Quran says so. And my mom, you know, she eventually got brainwashed. She would tell me that this is right, that, you know, she disobeyed her husband. He gets to hit her. And as a woman, I was also really disgusted growing up by all of the sexual justifications in the Quran. You know, my mother would tell me, you know, the Quran says she, you know, needs to consummate her marriage every 4 months with her husband, even if he's abusive. You know, she would always teach us that divorce is taboo. We need to, you know, keep the Islamic family together. And she was really proud of that. She, you know, to this day prides herself over the fact that, you know, Islam is the fastest growing religion, really just because, you know, Muslims are having so many kids. And that to me, that was just always just a wrong, a wrong feeling in my spirit, you know, just so much hypocrisy in my childhood.
Yes, to add a little bit of context to the situation, because Western women, growing up in the Western Christian values of being who you are and follow your dreams and all of this thing, they always ask us that why Muslim women, well, those people are the most abused, and why don't they rebellion? That's called projection, psychological projection. You're projecting your values, your views to somebody that has none of that. A girl that has grown up in an environment of abuse, it's been always bound to this type of mentality that if you laugh in front of everybody publicly, that means you're given the green light or signal. If you look inside straight to someone's eyes, that's another signal. All of these things have been given to these rules. This is strict rules. You have to wear your hijab to just keep crush your spirit as a person, from a person that God has you're born for freedom. They have trained you and crushed you and brainwashed you and programmed you to slavery. And somehow now that Western woman says, well, why don't they just come out and rebel against it? Well, the Iranian women they have for years after years after years. Iranian women, when you look at the Green Movement, when we look at the women of Iran constantly coming out, what do they get in return? More abuse, more torture, more rape, more acid attacks. So they try to, with intimidation, fear, and the religious dogma and excuses, to push you back into that spot of wear your hijab, shut up, according to the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34, that if I fear rebellion, not that you're rebellion, just if the husband fear rebellion, it's just if it just feels that you're moving out of your position, he is sanctioned, permitted by the Quran, by Allah of Islam, that to beat the heck out of you. And there is no Islamic courts or Sharia courts. And that woman has, well, Allah says it has to be good for me. So that spirit is crushed in you, and somehow you're so brainwashed and manipulated. Your mind is so molested from childhood that you think this is good for you actually, instead of being evil. So that's a little bit of context to that. And abuse is one of the most common thing in Islamic marriages anywhere in the world. If you look at any research, such as Pew Research surveys, you find out 80-90% of Muslim women physically or sexually have been harassed and abused by the time they're a teenager. So going back to your testimony or story, Stephanie, which is fascinating. Um, Now you're growing up seeing all of this, and then there's the clash of identity. I'm a Muslim, I'm Bengali, I'm South Asian, but now I'm in New York in this melting pot. I'm seeing all these things. I'm seeing Christian other people. They seem to be those people that we look down upon them
Oh yeah.
as Muslims, right? They seem to be, they should be doing worse, but they're actually doing better than us. We call ourselves Muslims. We are the best of the religion. We have it all figured out. But when I look at their lives, they seem to be doing better. And were these things confusing, question raising, any of that?
So confusing, and I eventually had to lean in and embrace a double life because I knew there was no winning at home. At home, there was a huge power dynamic. My dad's, at the top trying to, you know, be the fear monger. My mom takes that, projects it onto me and my sister, and I was pretty much powerless. I learned to just, zip it up and just keep it, shut. So, at home, I did all the right things. I prayed 5 times a day. I did it just to keep them happy because I know any little thing, instead of it being a moment of grace and a moment of clarity, it's a moment of chastisement. So if, I forget to pray 5 minutes late, she starts, screaming at me and it's like the end of the world, and everything is so based around fear. And that was also really abnormal to me, is why are we in fear of God and not loving of God? And I think that's a reason why we also rejected Christ. Hindsight is 2020, but my parents were always like scared of, like, God forbid we talk about any other prophet besides Muhammad. I remember, bringing up this conversation. And I was like, Mom, what miracles did Muhammad perform? Because Jesus walked on water, Moses split the sea, Jonas survived inside the fish, Samson was super strong. What exactly did Muhammad do? Because what I was taught is that he was a really skilled military strategist. He married a bunch of women. Um, and at the time growing up, the way I was served this is the miracle is that he was given the Quran even though he was illiterate, that he, was showered with, the revelation of the Quran by the angel Gabriel. I was scared as a kid because Gabriel is the angel of death. And that sounds terrifying. For an angel of death to visit you and give you this entire Quran, that sounds like schizophrenia. And I told my mom, like, that sounds like a demon. And she was really, really upset and she completely shut it down. I couldn't bring it up again. Like any level of like criticism, even just the conversation and discourse, it was met with anger. It was met with, you know, the fact that you're even questioning this means you're wavering your faith. It means that you're being influenced. And it was always blaming. It's you're spending too much time with your non-Muslim friends. Now you're questioning Islam. You're being a smartass, just all of these things. And I had to just bottle it in. So, until it took me like 10, 15 years to move out, then I could start and pick up the pieces of the puzzle again.
So the questions always were there, but
Yeah.
instead of having a logical conversation about it, well, um, the other prophets had miracles, legitimate miracles, and then it comes to Muhammad, and there's nothing out there. So you have to make up stuff that he was illiterate and received the Quran, and now that's a miracle. Or he flew on Barak, from Mecca to Jerusalem. I mean, the most useless miracle you could ever put out there. Like totally from a fairy tale. You just make it up and throw it out there and hope it's gonna stick because praise the Lord. Are there any eyewitnesses? None of that matters in Islam. Like, if you ask evidence, proofs, if you ask any sorts of leak of, for example, manuscripts, that is the last in the mind of a Muslim. Blind faith is all we require. Even if God knows it's not even that, it is total surrender. Islam means taslim, means surrender, submit. Do not ask questions, none of these things. You just go for it. We tell you it's been generation after generation, fathers after fathers told their sons. And here we're Muslims, I'm proud of it. And as soon as you ask questions, oh my goodness, I never forget Stephanie, my mom, like
Yeah.
my father. You ask anything about Islam? I said, one time I had this discussion with my dad that he said, why not? I was praying to Jesus, and this is after my conversion, and then he said, why not Muhammad? I said, Muhammad is dead, like dad. Like, I mean, he was a smart, educated person. He was top of his class in the universities, and you're like, how could a dead person? You're in medical. You're in hospitals all the time. You understand how could you talk to a dead person and somehow he's gonna hear your prayer? I mean, you could see
Yeah.
things like literally. The fear, you could feel it in the atmosphere. That was the response. I mean, you're in a smart, but I'm not talking somebody that couldn't read or illiterate. I mean somebody that's that smart, and that's the answer you get in Islam. But we had to break out. You had to break out. Tell us how that happened. Finally, you say, okay,
Oh,
how many of these prayers are throw out there? How many fasting? How many eats? How many sacrifices? These animals, all of this thing. How much of this is necessary? And what is happening to me? Where are my brownie points?
I reached a breaking point because every step in my life, everything I was doing, when I was in high school, um, actually I was a senior in high school when the lockdown started, when the pandemic started.
Wow.
And so now I'm stuck at home 24/7 with my parents, and they're justifying the pandemic with this is a test from God. And it's everything. Even when my grandmother was sick, they the narrative was we fight too much in this family, and that's why God punished us by making our grandma sick. And my grandmother ended up passing away really early. She died in 2015. Rest in peace. But to this day, the narrative is everything is a test. We should be grateful for a sickness. We should be, thankful, for cancers and tumors and this and that. When the lockdown happened, my mom took it as a sign as this is what we all deserve because the ummah is not, doing the right thing. And she starts pouring herself into religion even more, just like hours and hours a day reading the Quran. And to me, that was even more confusing because we're reading it in Arabic. Even native Arabs, people who are from the Arab world, even they have a tough time understanding the Quran because, it's so difficult. So how can Bengali people, this is a completely foreign language. They're not even pronouncing it properly. And she's telling me that you have to read the Quran every day in Arabic. You need to pray in Arabic. And I'm just regurgitating. I'm just losing hope. And I'm like, at this point, I'm almost in rock bottom. Like, I'm in deep depression. And my relationship with my family is really rough because they used anything to stifle me in the household, any sort of creative expression. I've always really been into like fashion and makeup and music and songwriting. I feel like that's like a gift from God that I got. But that too. Music, no. You can write nasheeds, you can write Islamic songs. That doesn't come to me naturally because it just feels like I'm working for the demon. But I would still pretend, I'd go to the mosque, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'm gonna, listen to Islamic music, at least it's something. And the worst part of it, I think living with my parents during lockdown is after 15 years of staying silent, I actually went to my parents and I told them about a family member who was abusing me. And instantly, just denial. I had to get the cops involved because they were so angry. They didn't want me to leave the house and they were physically blocking me from leaving. And like thank goodness, I don't know what happened that day. Like God was on my side, even before I knew him, but I just felt such a sense of peace. My parents were shouting at me. They said, "You ruined our reputation. Why did you go to the cops? This happens to every girl. You know how it is in our culture." And thank goodness, my husband, my boyfriend at the time, it's funny, his first name and last name is like JZ, his initials, and we always laugh, like it's Jesus Christ, that's your name. And he was just sending me all of these messages, like just stay strong. And even that relationship, by the way, had to be like, behind closed doors for a long time because of my parents' inability to open their hearts because he's actually a Messianic Jew. So he's Jewish, but they believe in Jesus and he's had his own story too, and it's beautiful. But even that too, we were taught Muslims are number one. Muslim men, even if they beat you, even if they threaten you, even if they want to kill you, he's still Muslim. He's still better than the Jewish guy who takes care of you and loves you and is always there for you. So even that relationship was a big source of pain with them. Anyways, I hit rock bottom. I'm just sick of it. You know, I start doing everything. I'm pouring myself into college. It's still COVID-19. I'm doing anything I can, like any odd job, call center, hospital, fast food. I'm working like 5 jobs, doing college full time, saving up every little penny in secret because I was taught that every penny I earn needs to go back to them. And there were moments where my dad actually stole thousands of dollars from us, and he would justify it. He would take money from my account, and I was taught not to question it because the consequences would be worse. And so secret bank account, saving up lots of money. I move out, and even the day that I moved out, it was extremely traumatic. My dad was physically blocking the door. We had to actually call the police. One of my friends at the time, she came to give me support. My husband was standing outside the door just in case. And even the police were laughing, because my mom, she told the cops, she said, my daughter's Muslim and she's 23 years old. And in our culture, they're not allowed to move out. And the cops laughed in her face. They were like, "Ma'am, your daughter's 23?" And she was like, "Yes." She was crying, crocodile tears. She was like, "I don't know why my daughter would do this. She's clearly being influenced by her kafir friends." And that was it. That was
The
it.
police is like, what in the world is she talking about?
And I could he was and, God bless him, he was trying to maintain his composure and be professional, but I could see it. He's just, like, laughing and he rolling his eyes. Just ridiculous, yeah.
New York policeman is like, what cave
Yeah. Like,
have you been in there?
he's not getting paid enough for this, yeah.
Have you seen War in America? Okay, 23 years old. In our culture, this is not your culture. This is American culture. That is
Yeah,
crazy. So that's when you decided to move out. I'm done here. I'm done with this abuse. I'm done with all of the situations and this hostile environment. I mean, I'm out.
yeah. I'm out, yeah, and I had, like, 1 pair of shoes, my backpack with, like, a few outfits, and then, like, the secret money that I saved up, and literally, my husband would, put me on a flight with him, and we were out. Next thing I'm living this new life in Chicago, but I'm still depressed. Every single day, I'm crying because, it's hard, to be rejected by your own parents, and I'm just still dealing with identity clash, and I'm still trying to, convince myself that I need to be Muslim, that this is what I need to do. And so I'm forcing myself to pray, but it's not coming to me. I'm sitting on the prayer mat and nothing is clicking. And my husband is being really patient with me. He's like, I don't think Islam is right for you, but I'm gonna let you walk on your path because I trust you. And he was praying for me. And one day I just hit rock bottom. Every single day I'm crying. I don't even shower. I don't brush my teeth. I don't brush my hair. I don't leave the house. I wake up. I don't even turn the lights on all day. I don't even drink water. I don't use the bathroom. And I'm like this for like a month. And something needs to change. This isn't normal. This isn't me. This isn't the same girl who was going to college, working 5 jobs and doing all these things and keeping up with life. I have zero motivation to do anything. And I still, just because it's the only thing I know how to do, I'm still trying to pray to Allah at the time. And I'm, doing all the things that, they say to do. You go on Google, there's a dua for this, there's a dua for that. Nothing's working. I'm still waking up miserable. I don't have any grace for myself. I'm not grateful for anything. Um, I'm actually smoking marijuana every single night, get high, eat a lot of food, just to end the day, go numb, wake up the next day, rinse and repeat. And it wasn't until there was a moment where I believe I said something along the lines of like, God, I need you. Like I know as soon as I have you, and not just the thing that I've been praying to, but the real God, if you reveal yourself to me, everything will fall into place. And I'm not going to have this anxiety anymore because I was getting chest pain every single day. Like I couldn't breathe. And the doctors, my blood work was normal, everything was normal. I have no health issues, thank God. But I'm getting panic attacks every single day and I'm crying all the time. My hair is falling out. Um, the only thing that's working is, my addiction. The same night, I have a dream. And to this day, it's like the best dream I've ever had. I wish I could have this dream every night. I see Jesus, and he's exactly what you would think he looks like, but even more beautiful. And he just like, I knew instantly that's him. And his voice was like an embrace. And he's like, Stephanie, this is me. And I wake up the next morning and I was like, where was this my entire life? You know? And now I knew that I needed to leave in order for that to happen. But, I have the dream. And now I'm like, okay, I know Jesus is the real deal. What do I need to do now? What are the next steps? So I start reading the Bible, with sincere intent for the first time in my life, not just flipping through the pages. And it's funny because the first Bible I ever touched was, when you go to like a motel in America, usually they always have a Bible in the desk, which is beautiful, by the way. It makes sense because you'll never see a Quran in a hotel room. Okay, that's not going to bring you peace. But with the Bible, it just clicked. There's an answer for everything. I read it, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., 7 a.m. Anytime I need to, I just go flip to a random page and I just pour myself in. And I'm like, this is working, right? So a week passes. Then I revisit my conversation with Jesus and I'm like, I know you're real, but I don't know how to serve you. I don't know what to do with this new love that I have for you. And so I ask him once again, please tell me what I need to do with this new life. And I have a dream with him again the same night, so my second dream with Jesus in 2 weeks. And he's like, you need to make content. And he literally said that, and it's so weird because my entire life I've always struggled with my purpose and I have so many different interests. And it just felt so concrete. He was like, you need to make content. You're probably going to write a book. You're going to, talk about your life. And it made sense. And then I literally just started talking about anything and everything. I started making like Instagram and YouTube videos and things started clicking. I started waking up on time. I go outside more, like I'm eating again. I show up as a good mother for my child and I'm excited to talk to people and mainly I'm fearless. I have a voice and I talk to people. I'm very unapologetic. I don't really get a sense of shame anymore. I was always shamed as a kid for talking too much. And my mom always told me, girls shouldn't laugh out loud. They shouldn't wear perfume. They shouldn't, take up space in a room. They should be very, timid and small. And all of those walls were just shattered. Like now it's like I have zero sense of shame and like zero sense of guilt.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. So you had two dreams
Yeah.
in a couple of weeks. Every time you asked
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, I know you're real, or God, show me yourself, or what's the way? Boom, you have
Yep.
an answer.
Yep. And I, I've like the fool I was, for 21 years praying five times a day, sometimes even more, if you're doing like the
Let me
hajj.
put prayer in quotation. This is quotation, air quotation, because they're not praying.
Mhm.
The prayer is you're having a conversation with somebody that you know, somebody that exists.
Right.
Islamic, quotation again, Islamic repetition of repeating something that you do not understand, and then you stand facing Mecca in your prayer rug, doing this posture routine. It's not prayer. It's you being told you need to do because this is what we do. This is part of the Sharia. This is what Muslims do. The name of it is Salat. Actually, when you look at those two chapters that you're doing, it's all polemics toward Christianity. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. You are saying not the way of those Jews that you have been bestowed your wrath upon them, and the Christians that have gone astray. That's not prayer. You're telling Allah, guide me through the straight path. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. This is the straight path. Islam is. And then you're telling that the Jews and Christians are somehow evil in this situation. What prayer is that? That is in all of the Muslims anywhere in the world. Those are the two chapters. Five times say 17 times they repeat that without not knowing what they're saying. But your prayer was, God, in a language you understand.
Okay.
God, show yourself. I'm sick and tired of this life. All of these years I've been praying, all of these years supposedly praying, all of these years I've been doing this ritual. There has no peace. There is nothing in this.
Mm-mm.
You show me what it is, and then boom, you have the dream of Jesus.
Absolutely. And
Amazing.
I I always joke about this with my friends because I speak 6 languages and none of them are the language of Islam, by the way, and
You haven't been in Arab yet.
yeah,
Arabized.
that was by design. My parents really pushed for me to learn Arab, and I always rejected it. I was like, I can't go down. I can't waste the intelligence in my brain on this language that I'm simply going to use just to ritualize every single day. And
Mhm.
um, even on that end, rituals were a big deal in my household. And even to this day, my dad still insists on praying for me to return to Islam. He wants, my daughter to be Muslim. And he messaged me and he says that, Stephanie, I sacrificed a goat in your name, in your honor, because I want, you know, you to come back to Islam. Even when I was sick, the first thing would, and they call it sadaqah, but to me it was
Yep.
you're shedding innocent blood. Every time it would be like they killed a goat, they killed a lamb, they sacrificed some sort of animal, and they make a whole thing out of it. And it was almost like witchcraft to me.
It truly is. It's truly
Like,
superstitious and
yeah,
witchcraft that
like
I'm
you,
shedding blood for an unknown God,
yeah.
that that blood of that animal is going to feed that God, and that supposedly is going to answer my manipulation, my witchcraft.
I'm almost impressed by how much work it takes for Muslims. They think they put in all of this work to not even know if they're gonna go to heaven or not. And I used to pride myself on that. I used to be prideful of look at me, I do all this work. I wash myself 5 times a day, get on the mat, I read the Quran, do the fasting, the sacrifices, all of this work when it's as easy as literally opening up opening up your Bible and talking to God. But that you can't get through with that with my family. They reject that.
So your dad is still prays that and pays somehow um, ransom his God, that you somehow wake up and then say, "Man, I'm going to denounce Christ and Christianity and the reality of how God loves me, and I can through I can pray in a language I understand, and He responds in a language I understand. I throw this all of this out the window and go back to that religion that held me hostage for the many years I was part of it."
I think it's coping, you know. I think there's like deeper mental health issues, and I think, you know, Islam works for people who want that. If coping and being in denial works for you, then you know, you're in the right place. But I never saw the fruits of their labor. You know, the fruits of their labor is, you know, my dad prays 5 times a day, but he's still angry. He's still in a scarcity mindset. You know, he's still, you know, 40 years down the line, still praying to God to have enough money to go to Mecca for the pilgrimage. And to me, that's scary. You know, my dad used to always say, "We're all gonna be one big happy family and we're gonna go to Hajj." And I said, "No," because how does that make sense that you're telling me that I don't I'm not allowed to ever talk to boys and I have to cover up, but then you go to Mecca and there's men and women just squeezed like sardines,
My
just rubbing
God,
up against each
yes.
other, trying to touch the Kaaba. You know, the men are touching the women in front of the Kaaba, and that was scary. I knew, you know, for there was a reason why God wasn't giving us that bounty because, you know, and there's just so many more stories like that. You know, we had families around us who they did tabligh, which is like a specific thing where they're really big into like proselytizing and getting people to be the best versions of Muslims. And I remember one time at a mosque, I was praying next to this lady, you know, praying, doing the salat, and she literally, I guess I had my legs in, like, the wrong position, and in the middle of salah, she grabs my thigh and, like, moves it over to, like, the proper form, proper position for praying, and, just goes right back to praying, you know, doesn't ask me, like, no permission, just literally touches me and, like, grabs my body part and puts me in the right prayer position. And to her, she was so convicted in that she thought that was proper. And, she would come up to me and, like, just randomly start putting the niqab around me, and then she'd be like, "Oh, that's better. You look much better now." And, you know, this was the type of culture in, like, our society is like, "That's okay." You know? I'm just gonna come up to a stranger and correct you so that, you know, you could be on the good side.
Yes, yes. That is part of the Islamic Sharia, that you correct others in the for the sake of Islam, and if they're misguided, you're there to correct them and even punish them and bring them back to beautiful Islam. So this is, we call it in Farsi, Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi az Munkar, meaning you guide them to what it is, the knowledge of Islam, and then you rebuke him when they are mistaken, such as what you were doing, improper prayer. So there's somebody there to correct you. So, Stephanie, so this is your story is fascinating. Truly, it's fascinating what you have gone through, and then of course during COVID, getting locked in, and now you didn't even have those few hours that you could go to school and get away.
No.
And then now you're fully immersed in Islam, and Allah is punishing us because the Ummah of Islam, the community of Islam, hasn't been good enough for Allah. So He has brought us COVID
Yeah.
to get locked in and punished in all of this.
Yeah.
So, and then you finally break out and get away. Thank God for your boyfriend who helped you in this path to get out. Um, can you tell us now? Do you guys attend a church, or have you been baptized yet? All of those beautiful Christian activities that Christians do.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So, I left home about, yeah, almost 2 to 3 years ago. Since then, I think, you know, let alone Christianity, just a sense of community. It's like a totally different world, you know? Like we have this new outlook on life. I don't struggle with depression. I'm still human, so I get my moments of anxiety, but community itself, I show up for people. And then of course with that, um navigating church life is easy. I mean, I'm not the best. A lot of times I find myself, doing like the virtual services because I don't wake up on time, but that's just on me, so I need to pray on that. Um and actually my father-in-law, he's Christian, and he's been a church choir singer for like 40, 50 years.
Oh,
So that's somebody that he leads by example, and um I can foresee my musical life kind of blending in with that church life real soon. Bible is like an everyday thing in my household. We're always reading the Bible. We have multiple types of Bibles, in the car, in the bedroom. Um, Even my mother-in-law gave me this little book. It's called 3-Minute Prayers for Moms. And I feel so seen because, when I was Muslim, nobody really came up to me and like told me like, hey, like, you know, there's really easy, accessible ways to talk to God besides this really difficult language and this antiquity language. And everything is just so easy. Things just make sense. We meet Christian people of all ages. Um, I think without Christ, it's really easy to get caught up in the daily stressors of life. And we're really young. We're in our 20s, and usually the type of world you live in right now, people in our 20s are really lost or really aimless. We spend Most of my friends spend hours on social media comparing their life, their body, their image. And it doesn't matter to me anymore. And even when it does, I just give it to God. Like we had a baby last year, and it was hard because when you're in your 20s, people are not worried. That's not a priority anymore. People want to party and people want to live life, and they have this nihilist thinking. And when I got pregnant, a lot of my friends, they were telling me, you're ruining your life, you're wasting your 20s. This is your time to, have fun. And then I go to church and it's the opposite. People love it. They're like, "Whoa, you did the thing. You fulfilled your faith. You had a kid." And it's like a different community. People welcome children, they're not like, "Oh, your child is annoying. Leave them at home. The baby's crying." They want it. They embrace it. They're like, "Bring your family. Come as you are, even if you're tired, even if you didn't get any sleep last night, just come, we're here to help you."
children are blessing from the Lord,
Mhm.
and then they bring intention to your life, of course, and um, they make you selfless, which is a godly attribute. It's a godly characteristic to have. And the people that they say children are burden, they
Mhm.
are those selfish, materialistic people that they're nihilistic. They do not understand the joy of being a mother, a father, a selfless person that cares for others. It's all about me and how my lustful, evil desires are fulfilled. But thank God for the example of Christianity. And when you're talking about you don't care and that you're not impressed with all these things, that your friends are impressed, um, you're light, because Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, 29, and 30, that my burden is light and my yoke is easy. You don't have this pressure. You don't have this performing mentality anymore, that if I do not do certain ritualistic things per day, I'm doomed to hell and Allah is going to burn me in hell. No, Jesus has done it for me. I accept it. And if I need help, He carries the yoke with me. It's not like, say, you go do it on your own. No, He tells you, my yoke is easy, because He's carrying His part. And then we get attached to that yoke and we go. And it's very, very light when you walk with Him and live with Him. There is nothing in Christianity and Islam that are similar. These are not Abrahamic faiths. These are not two different branches that get you to the same God. Absolutely not. They're the opposite. One is a performing religion that you have to keep up with the Joneses, and in our cases, with Muhammad's and Zahra's and Ali's, and you're never enough. You never measure up. You're never good enough for them. They train the most professional hypocrites you will ever live your life with,
Mhm.
because they're one way at home, one way at the mosque, and one way at the club.
Right.
And they're the most professional hypocrites. But Christianity is not like that. You go to the church, they're the same. They go to their homes, they're the same. Thank God. And their gods are different. Their scriptures are different. Their worships are different. There's nothing in common. There is no common ground between Islam and Christianity. And we ex-Muslim tend to understand it in a deeper sense. And because we live both life, and you're like, my goodness, these people actually, they are actually happy. They're not pretending when guests come over or when they're at mosques.
Mhm.
They don't pretend. They're actually happy. That's who they are. They're living their lives.
Yeah, and this is a harsh term, but I felt like a slave when I was Muslim, and we were taught that. We were taught that we are, we submit ourselves, we're enslaved to the submission to God. And for years I told myself like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing. I'm a slave. That's good. And I was taught that Christians are doing the wrong thing. I was taught that they are the aimless ones and that they are not on the right path because we live in fear. And I was taught that fear is good because it keeps you in check. And that's really detrimental for your nervous system to live like that for years and years and years, to always be in fear, looking over your shoulder. And even bedtime stories, instead of, reading typical books to your kids, my mom would read Islamic stories to us at bed. And she would tell me don't ever do anything that's gonna upset the angels that sit on your shoulders, and they always throw that out there.
Nakir ga munkar, yes.
Yeah, yeah, Munkar and Nakir, and like everything. Everything is just
It's genius that they write every act, one
yeah, yeah,
write the good, one write the bad,
every
and
single
it's horrifying, truly horrifying. And then they visit you in the grave.
Mhm.
I grow up. I totally relate to what you're saying, Stephanie, because those are my uh, bedtime stories. And then I sometimes listen to the cassette tape of
Mhm.
those imams, those scholars. I mean, it is the most terrifying stories, worse than any horror movies you could ever come up with. That supposedly, when you're on the other side, how the hellfire Allah is burning you while you're tied up with the skin burns, and then it puts another skin to burn it, and then and you're like, I would sleep. I would sleep after I listen to these things or hear those stories, and then go to bed. And I had the worst nightmare of any human being who could paralyze in my sleep. It
Mhm.
is terrifying, truly terrifying.
So scary. But even with the nightmares, what I was taught the next morning is you didn't pray. That's why God punished you with this nightmare. You forgot to pray before you went to bed.
Blame
Or
is on you again. Yeah.
you were thinking of negative thinking. And so it's always a blame. It's always you're giving in to say, and it's like, no, you're feeding me this energy. All sorts of things like if you waste food there's gonna be like 17 snakes in the grave. When you lie, your tongue is gonna come out and reveal everything, and just really scary imagery. And watching at the mosque, they would make us watch these cartoons, but of like Muhammad children's cartoons, but he's faceless and he's just going around doing these very I guess, very diluted versions of his actual deeds, and they would teach us I remember this one time in the mosque they had this sermon about interfaith, discourse, and they taught us that Muhammad married a Jewish woman. What they didn't teach me was that he took her captive and killed her brother and her father.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then took her the same day, and she ended up poisoning him or something like that. And
Mhm.
that that you can never bring that up with a Muslim. They will reject that, and they will tell you that you're bringing up total lies. And I I I was brainwashed for decades. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I think you and I, we can talk for another 6 hours here if necessary about this thing, which is very, very interesting, I think. Um, so you're involved in music and all of this artistic things. Can you tell us a little more about those things?
Yeah, sure. I've always had a musical inclination. I think, you know, I think I could sing and dance before I could even walk, that's how I
Wow.
put it. But
Both of them are prohibited, is
yeah,
considered
yeah.
illegal, especially for a woman. My gosh.
So imagine this is like, you know, I want to pursue these things. All my friends around me, they're pursuing this, they're going to music school, they're going to dance school, and they're thriving. And some of them, now they're professionals in their field. And I could tell my mom wanted to give that to me, but at the end of the day, she had to submit to my dad. And so she put me in music school when I was really, really little, 3 or 4 years old. 'Cause even she was still dealing with this cultural identity of, music is really a big part of South Asian culture, but it's not part of Islam. And she's telling herself that Islam comes first. That's number one. And so eventually, she pulls me out suddenly and randomly just drops me in Islamic school, you know? So here I go from doing music, the thing that I love every week, dancing with my friends. We're performing all over New York City. I'm making, a a sense of community. Next week, I'm wearing the hijab and I'm just, reciting the Quran like every day, rocking back and forth, doing the recitations. I lose all my friends, They're looking at me like, what happened to you? And I have nothing to say because I'm just following what my parents are doing. And my mom tells me, you know, basically, to hell with all of that music stuff, that's only gonna bring you harm. She would tell me stories of, people who became singers and then, God gave them throat cancer or some sort of mouth cancer because of that, and all of these stories, and she'd tell me, "You're dancing in front of men," and to me, that makes no sense because that's not, you're equating, like, a 6, 7-year-old dancing with her friends to, like, as if I'm, like, a stripper or something, and I could tell she was also justifying it to herself because she used to love singing and dancing, and somewhere she got really lost and brainwashed, and she told herself that that's not appeasable to God, and she put that on me, and so I would secretly sing, I would wait for them to leave the house, I would write songs in the bathroom, and it took me 15 years to even perform again on stage because I knew the repercussions of going public with that. I knew the community had its eyes on me, so yeah, after she pulled me out of music school, it took me decades, so much lost time that I could have been working on my craft, and now, thankfully, I'm writing songs again, and I'm actually putting them out to the public, but I always think about, how much time I lost because, the people who should have been supporting me were putting a lot of doubt in my heart.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm gonna pray for your mom, especially for your mom. I'm gonna pray for the rest of your family, but for your mom especially. Like she'll break out of this, and by the grace of God, the light will shine into her heart, and then help her, strengthen her to break out and pursue what God has for her instead of this oppressive religion that she's caught in now. But
Amen.
we have a I mean, for us, when you come out of those situations, it's a little harder for us because we think, how? I mean, this person is so bound by this thing. But for God, with man, Jesus said, it is impossible, but with God, all things are possible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep praying for your family, especially your mom, Stephanie. And any final thoughts? Anything that you want to add? If somebody's watching, we have Bengali Muslims that are my watching from New York. Do you have anything to tell them?
If there's even an ounce of doubts or questions in your heart, just go for it. Just pray, and pray in the way that you were told not to pray. Because especially especially for I know the Bengalis who will watch this, they are hell bent on the Arabic and they are hell bent on the recitation. Just completely dismantle all of that and just go to God as you are and just ask him, like, what do I need? What do you want from me? And you will get answered. There's so many Muslims that I'm running into nowadays, ex-Muslims, and all of them, like, it seems to be this trend. Everybody's just asking out to God in plain language, and they're seeing Jesus in their dreams. I've met like 3 or 4 people just this month alone, and they're all having dreams with Jesus, and then they're converting to Christianity within like the same month or the same year. And so I think that must be the key.
It must be.
Yeah.
At least one of the keys.
Yeah.
I heard it from a friend. I know many people I had in this show
Mhm.
that went to church one time. These Muslims, one time they went to church. They said, "This cannot be the same place. This cannot be the same God. This cannot be the same people." This is that's all they needed to make that decision. Was that one church visit? Many of them they had dreams.
Mhm.
Um, Many of them friends talked to them. Many of them just saw or were involved in a Christian friend or somebody, family that were invited to or something like that. Just little things that makes a difference, but that help them break out of the oppressive religion that they were held truly hostages in it, and they broke out of it and they came out and now they're just the weight is gone. That oppressive mentality of I'm controlling you and the fear is around you. And every time you make a mistake, I
Mhm.
weaponize the guilt over you. All of that is gone, and they're living their lives freely. They love in Christ and Christianity and the church, and it is a pattern. Um, I am highly impressed by your story, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Just keep sharing it. If Jesus has told you make content, put it out there. And there are people that we are helping. This is the truth. There are people that we are helping, and they need our help. Christians, brothers and sisters, you see, simple things are helping Muslims come out. Use your mouth, use your love, you use your care, um, and then talk to people when you're seeing Muslims. Don't shy away. Don't be afraid of them. Just share the gospel. Invite them to a church. Invite them to your home. Do something. The exodus of Muslims is a real thing. It is happening. They're coming out here and across the world. And you and I, we can be part of changing someone's destiny forever for good, for the kingdom of God, for Jesus Christ. Isn't that beautiful? If people want to get a hold of you, Stephanie, where do they need to go? The
Really
links are in the description.
first and last name, Stephanie Raza and everything.
That's awesome. Stephanie Raza,
Yeah.
Raza, correct? That's awesome. Folks, you heard it once again. Praise God. Another testimony, another powerful, powerful, powerful testimony of another Muslim who has forsaken her father's religion and come out, and here she's sharing it. If you know other ex-Muslims, if you are an ex-Muslim, come my way. Info at iranchristians.org. Info at iranchristians.org. Come out and share your stories. You can be part of someone else's journey and helping someone else out of this uh, religion. Remember, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you're subscribed. Write in the comment, please, where you're watching from. It will do two things. It will blesses my heart and helps the algorithm to suggest this video to others that they could see it. Give us a thumbs up. And until next, I love you. God loves you, and Christ is King. Thank you so much, sister.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. You're a blessing. God bless you. Have a great day, folks.
Too.